Welcome to video 8 in our Play Pedagogy series. In this video, we'll be looking at high quality observations. This is the second of two videos on high quality observations, so if you've not yet watched video 7, we would suggest going back and watching that first. The aim of this video is to explore the practical considerations when writing observations. We will look at the language used, types of observations, and take you through an example using the observation cycle explored in the previous video. To remind you where we left off in video 1, we will quickly revisit the concept of significant learning in terms of observations. While we may record short observations all the time to support our planning, the observations we take to be used as assessment evidence must detail significant learning. So what is significant learning? Well, significant learning for one child may not be the same as for another. It can be tempting to capture nice moments for a child in an observation, such as when they're kind to one of their peers by sharing. Although this may constitute significant learning for some children, as it's the first time they've done this independently or in a context that's unusual for them, for others this may be a common part of their everyday interactions, and it would not warrant an observation. We need to keep in mind that the purpose of these types of observations are as assessment evidence. We are using them to evidence significant learning and progress made by a child. Significant learning is an act, action, or display that illustrates that a child has mastered a new skill or developed a new understanding. It's also key to note that the very first time a child does something that is new, it may be accidental or not intentional, and while recording this for assessment evidence, it's useful to have a body of evidence that shows that this new learning can be applied in different contexts. Writing observations. Observations are a key method of assessment. We use these to document learning to ensure we can see progress over time and to share this with children and their families. Observations are a key part of the child-centred pedagogy and practice cycle from Realising Ambition, which we've had a look at more closely in videos before. When writing observations, we need to be aware of the ethical considerations being made. Article 3 of the UNCRC asks us to consider what is in the best interest of the child. We should always ensure children feel comfortable being observed, and it may be useful to explain this process to your learners. When taking observations, we should remain respectful and responsive to children's needs. Let's look at some examples of an observation. Julie was playing in the home corner with dolls. When another child came over, she gathered the dolls and moved to the other side. The child asked Julie to play, but she did not respond and continued to play with the dolls on her own. Alternatively, Julie chooses to play on her own and finds it difficult to play with other children and share toys. These are two observations of the same experience, but written differently. Consider which one is more dependable and why. You may want to pause the video here and consider this for a few moments. Let's look more closely at what makes a dependable observation. Again, these two observations are of the same experience. So, Jamie spent 25 minutes at the art easel. He used all of the colours offered and also mixed some of his own. Jamie said that he was painting a garden with lots of roses. Or, Jamie is very artistic. He has a very sensitive side to his personality. He enjoys activities that girls enjoy. Which of these is more dependable and why? The first one is factual, unbiased, and non-judgmental. The second observation is non-factual, biased, and judgmental. We try to stick to the facts and avoid biased or judgmental language when recording observations. What about this observation? Let's consider the notice part of the observation cycle we explored in video 1. What are you seeing or hearing that makes you take notice? What is new or different? The observation recorded should describe what we have noticed. Ben built a very tall tower. He was aware the tower was not balancing, saying, "It's getting wobbly," and adjusting the blocks several times to make it more stable. He allowed other children to join in to help stabilise the tower. He also invited them to join by saying, "Can someone go get some more bricks?" Ben compared the height of the tower to his own height, saying, "It's higher than me." Once we have recorded what we've noticed, we then have to consider the act part of the observation cycle. What information can we analyse from this? What does it tell us? Pause the video here and take a few minutes to consider this. From this observation, I know that Ben recognises the issue of continuing to build when his tower is wobbly. He can seek support from his peers to problem solve and find solutions. He's also using non-standard units of measure. We want to link that learning that we are noticing to the curriculum. So how would we act? What would we do now, and what might the child do? Pause here and take a few moments to consider this. The ACT section of the observation cycle details what you might do to support or extend the learning. This is planning, and it is not a next step for Ben, but it's a next step for us as the adults. We need to remember that a next step is something that a child might do, and planning is something that us as the facilitator will be doing. So, you could look at the early level measure benchmarks, and from there, you could start by adding provocation in the form of appropriate resources for measuring non-standard units, for example, lengths of string or ribbon, pine cones or cars, to your block area. Or you could use an interaction to introduce and role model other non-standard units of measure. For example, "I wonder how many handspans tall this tower is." Or you could set up an adult-led activity to compare the height of children using the language of taller and shorter. When writing observations, there are common words or short phrases that may be useful to have to help. You can print off what you can see on the screen here and add to it over time to make a bank of language that is useful for your observations. Observation templates can be useful when you're starting out with writing observations of play, as they provide prompts to remind you of specific things that you may want to include. But as you become more confident, post-it notes or a notepad and paper are really the only things that you need. The purpose of the observation will dictate the information you require. However, most narrative observations require child's name, date, time, a little about the context, a description of what we've noticed or the child's actions, and then the name or initial of the person taking the observation. You may also want to include links to the curriculum, children's voice, and next steps. Types of observations. There are a variety of different types of observations that can be taken and are used for a variety of purposes. The most commonly used observation is a short narrative. This is a short description and normally captures a moment of significant learning. It should include the context. This is used to evidence achievement, attainment, or progress in a child's learning. Personal achievement. This can be similar to the short narrative. It captures a moment of learning or development, often something a child has been practicing or been developing to master. Work sample. A piece of children's original work. This can be physical, written, or artwork, but can also be photos and videos of a discovery in the water tree or a piece of dance. Sampling over time allows us to see progress in learning. Long observation. This is an extended written account of an experience and would usually include a child's action or speech, including specific quotes. It might include a level of involvement from other children. This offers a more holistic picture of the child's learning and can provide useful information about motivation and interests, which can support future planning. Group. Group observations can be effective when looking to gain evidence for more than one child who is engaged in and achieved the same learning. They can be particularly useful when looking to observe personal, social, and emotional development. Time sample or time sampling. This involves recording observations of a child at regular intervals. This can be useful in identifying small details for a child, such as a trigger for specific behaviour, motivation, or how a child is coping in the environment. Sociogram. Sociograms allow us to look at a pattern of social behaviour. This can be useful to plan interactions or to identify children who require support or challenge in their communication with their peers. Room observations. Room observations allow us to observe how the environment is being used by the children. These can highlight areas that are being used effectively and areas that require development. This can also be used to support the preparation of risk assessments. Event sampling. This is a useful tool to identify the cause of certain actions or behaviours of children. It could include observing how the children reset the play resources, or how the children transition to lunch from play, or even how a group of children listen to a story. Templates for each of these types of observations are available as appendices of the Building High Quality Foundations Observations document, which is available on the Early Learning and Childcare website. So what? What do we do with observations? Practitioners should be using their observations to inform their future planning, leading to facilitating learning that supports and challenges children. We should then be recording further observations of new significant learning. We keep observations as our main source of assessment evidence in a play-based model. This should be shared with children and families in some way. In our early learning and childcare settings, these are shared with families through a learning story. This is the moderation cycle adapted to reflect a play pedagogy approach. We need to consider how we critically reflect on our observations, how we are using these as part of the moderation cycle to engage in professional dialogue with our colleagues about the standards and whether the observations we've recorded are meeting the requirements of the benchmarks or frameworks that we have planned for. More information about moderation in the early years is available over 2 training videos that can be found on the Early Learning and Childcare section of the Learning Library or on the Early Learning and Childcare website that you can see here. That brings us to the end of today's video. Thank you for your time.